I mean, how do you think behind the scenes he's handling what he likely sees as betrayal with Cohen's plea, with Pecker, with Weisselberg getting immunity?
Yeah, no, I'm not really even trying to take away from any of that. I do think it was a very bad week. There's 3 or 4 dominoes that fell this week. I sort of agree with my former law school professor, Alan Dershowitz, that the president, at least as the facts have been relayed and the facts that have been opened up so far, he hasn't done anything illegal. But I do think that it's an emotionally tolling week for the president because these are very close friends, or in the case of his CFO, had also worked for his dad. And the notion that these guys have been given immunity, and the notion that there's things that they're going to be talking about that are probably 10 to 40 years old, I think that's got to be emotionally taxing for the president. But I don't see at this point, as we unpeel the fact onion, even though the onion smells and it's uncomfortable, we haven't gotten to the illegality as it relates to the president yet. So let's see what happens. But I'm not shirking this. I'm trying to look at it very objectively. It was a very bad week.
Who does the president turn to at his absolute lowest moments?
Well, listen, I think the people that I saw that he turned to when I was working for him on the campaign during the transition and the short time I was in the White House are family members like Jared and Ivanka, Melania. I'm sure he has a very good relationship with Bill Shine. My guess is that there's 3 or 4 of his friends that have been with him for many years, whether it's Howard Lauber or Richie Lafrac in the real estate area. And so, yeah, he has a very open network of friends that are close to him, that like him personally. And so I'm sure he's talking to them. And my guess is he's frustrated about the situation. I think you saw some of that frustration in the Fox News interview when he was talking about the flipping situation.
Right.
I don't really think he wants to outlaw flipping as much as he's just upset. He feels he hasn't done anything wrong, and he feels that people are going to be pressured to say that he did something wrong in an effort to lower their sentences and things like that. So that's where I think all of that's coming from.
I mean, we know how much this president values loyalty, almost to a fault. The thing is, though, Trump doesn't give the same loyalty in return. When Papadopoulos went down, for example, Trump said he was a coffee boy. When Manafort went down, Trump said barely worked on the campaign. When Cohen pleaded guilty this week, Trump attacked him. Is this why so many people are starting to turn, because they see the president isn't going to have their backs?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of symmetrical loyalty, and I think when things transition from business into the political arena, the contact, it's more, you're going into a very different arena. Obviously, I learned that the hard way, Anna, but what ends up happening is that people get sliced and diced way more quickly. So as an example, if you're going to put Omarosa in the Situation Room for 2 hours, you're going to lock the door, and then you're going to very coldly fire her after she's worked alongside of you for 14 years. Whether you like her or you don't like her, you have to ask yourself if that's the right way to treat her in terms of exiting. As it relates to Michael, I thought the president was very close to Michael. He sat pretty close to him, so it's pretty hard to 100% disassociate yourself from Michael. And I find there's a bit of sadness for me because I like both of these people. I certainly have been very loyal to President Trump and want to help and support him. And Michael Cohen is somebody I've known for at least a decade. And I wish him and his family well. And I don't like seeing the internecine fight between everybody. But I think what ends up happening is if you get on the wrong side of the president, he'll light you up on Twitter. He'll light you up to his friends. And he may want to rethink that, because I don't know if that's necessarily helping him. I look at... you take away this personal stuff and you take away the intrigue of this week, and you look at that employment data that we were talking about earlier, or you look at all the good things that are going on in the world and in the economy, with the right strategy and the right delivery and messaging, he could have a way higher approval rating than he does right now. So
well, that's the thing. I mean, why isn't he talking about the economy?
Attack politics is probably not working.
Yeah, he's continuing yet to go after his Attorney General today, Jeff Sessions. He clearly sees him as not loyal enough. During your 11 days in the White House, you cleaned house unapologetically. Steve Bannon, Reince Priebus, gone. Does the president need someone like you to pull the ripcord on Sessions?
Well, he had somebody like me, and it turned out they didn't want somebody like me. But as it relates to Jeff Sessions, I have a very close relationship with Jeff. A little bit of trivia: we sort of joined the campaign at the same time, and so he was the first sitting senator to endorse President Trump. So you have to remember that he was very close to the president during the campaign and into the transition. I think what happened here is after James Comey got fired, the decision to recuse, and we can debate that decision, and we'll let historians debate that. I think the president really didn't want him to recuse. The president feels firmly that he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't see that there was a... Well, of course. So he didn't see his need for a special prosecutor. But again, you're not going to change the president's operating style. He's 72 years old now. I could sit here on your network and 15 other networks, and I can call him tonight. And if I get through on the switchboard, I can say, please don't be tweeting this stuff and don't be saying this sort of stuff. It's not helping you. But he's on missile lock as it relates to these sort of things because, he feels like Attorney General Sessions needed to step it up for him, and he doesn't feel like that's happened. So we can, again, debate all of these things, but here... Well, it's Washington. If you were in a business setting, he clearly would have been fired. In fact, one of the mistakes I made, and I made a whole phone book of mistakes in 11 days, but one of the mistakes I made is I looked at it like an entrepreneur, and I looked at it as a business setting. And so I said, okay, these guys are leaking. They don't have the right culture for the president. They're not serving him properly. So I was taking the approach in business, started firing everybody.
So
if the president went to fire Jeff Sessions,
would you try to help him with that?
No, because he would have
firing Jeff Sessions?
No, because he would have a nightmare on his hands in politics. It's very, very different in politics, Anna, than it is in business. If Jeff Sessions was the general counsel for the Trump organization, it's a totally different set of personnel decisions than if Jeff Sessions is his cabinet member, attorney general, has a ton of friends in the Senate. So my point is that we talk about having business leaders enter politics, but we do have to recognize that there are very different skill sets and very different norms of behavior between those two groups of people, business and politics. So, I think the president has to make that adjustment.
Sorry, I keep on stepping on you. I don't mean to, Anthony. They're just slight transmission delay. But let me ask you, because you talk about the difference between business and politics. It's not just the difference between business and politics, but it's also the difference between being the owner of a company, the boss of a company, versus the head of the government. And when you have different parts of government that are supposed to operate independently, when the president talks about hiring or appointing Jeff Sessions to the Attorney General position because he is loyal, and let me just read the reasoning he says. He's the only reason I gave him the job. I felt loyalty. I mean, this feud makes me wonder, is the president really just saying he wants somebody who is going to be in that office, who is going to make sure that he himself is never in any kind of legal trouble?
Well, let's apply a little bit of historical context, though. Jack Kennedy had Bobby Kennedy. Barack Obama, President Obama had Eric Holder, and I think that there was probably a much closer relationship in those two scenarios that I'm describing than the Attorney General Sessions and President Trump. And so if you're making the point that he wanted somebody loyal, like a general counsel inside the Trump organization, and you don't get that as president, what you get is somebody who is the avatar and the leader of the Justice Department for the United States that's overseeing the FBI and the U.S. Marshals, et cetera. That point is well taken. But I think what he's basically saying is, hey, I'm innocent. I think that's President Trump's best defense. In his heart, he believes he's innocent. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong. And so he would want Attorney General Sessions to acknowledge that after 17 or 18 months of fact-finding, he would sort of like to have this thing put behind him so he can focus on other things that will be more productive to the American people. But I get the point that you're making, and that's where the tension is when you put a business leader into the government. You have to understand that there's a lot more checks and balances, and you have to understand that there's individual and siloed accountability. It's not like he's just reporting to the president.
Right.
He has an ethical responsibility to the Constitution and to the other members of the government and to the American people.